3 weeks after the arena incident, Marcus noticed that conversations tended to pause when he entered a room. It wasn't the uncomfortable silence he'd experienced during his first months at the academy, but something different, a mixture of curiosity, respect, and careful evaluation. Word of his victory over Zixtar had spread throughout the academy and beyond. Carried by the informal networks that connected all galactic institutions, he was making his way to advanced tactical theory when Cadet Veltar fell into step beside him. The crystalline Altarian had been one of his few friends before the fight, and one of the fewer still who seemed unchanged by recent events. "Have you seen the latest dispatch from the Galactic Council?" she asked. "No, what about it?" "Your little demonstration has reached the attention of some very important people. There's talk of convening a special committee to reassess human military potential." Marcus stopped walking. "A committee?" "Official designation, Evaluation Panel for Emerging Species Combat Capabilities." "Unofficial designation. Figure out what else humans can do before they surprise us again." This was not what Marcus had wanted to hear. The last thing he'd intended was to draw high-level political attention to humanity's place in galactic civilization. The fight with Zixtar was supposed to be a simple matter of personal conflict resolution. "Veltar, this could cause problems for my whole species." "Or it could solve some problems," she replied. "Do you know how many species petitioned to have humanity's membership status reviewed after the first reports came out?" "How many?" "Zero." Marcus looked at her in surprise. "Zero?" The interesting thing about demonstrating unexpected capabilities is that it makes people reconsider their assumptions. Species that might have opposed human advancement before are now wondering what else they don't know about you. As they resumed walking, Marcus noticed other cadets watching them with obvious interest. Some nodded politely as he passed, a courtesy that had been rare before the arena incident. Others seemed to be studying him, as if trying to understand what they were looking at. "There's something else you should know," Veltar continued. "Academy Command has approved a new elective course for next term, Interspecies Combat Analysis. Guess who they've asked to help design the curriculum?" "Please don't say what I think you're going to say." "Congratulations, Marcus. You're going to be teaching your fellow cadets how to fight each other more effectively." The advanced tactical theory classroom was already full when they arrived. Professor Kexvan, a distinguished Zentarian with decades of military experience, was reviewing holographic displays of historical battles. As Marcus took his seat, he noticed several other cadets watching him with expressions that seemed to mix respect with wariness. "Today we will examine the Battle of Kepler Station," Professor Kexvan announced. "A classic example of how superior technology can overcome numerical disadvantages. The hegemony fleet defeated a force 3 times its size through the intelligent application of advanced weapon systems." The holographic display showed the famous engagement, with detailed representations of ship movements and weapons exchanges. It was a textbook example of technological superiority determining military outcomes, the kind of lesson that had been taught in military academies across the galaxy for centuries. Cadet Rethma, a young Zentarian who shared his professor's species, raised a manipulator appendage. "Professor, given recent events, should we also consider how analytical advantages might affect traditional technological superiority?" Professor Kexvan SI Stocks focused on the student. "Explain your question." "Well, sir, if a species can identify vulnerabilities that others miss, wouldn't that change the dynamics of technological advantage? Even superior weapon systems are useless if your opponent knows exactly where to strike for maximum effect." The classroom fell silent. Everyone understood that Rethma was referring to Marcus's defeat of Zixtar, but raising the topic in this context gave it broader strategic implications. "An interesting point," Professor Kexvan said after a moment. "Cadet Chung, would you care to comment?" Marcus felt dozens of pairs of eyes focusing on him. This was clearly what Rethma had been angling for, and probably what several other cadets had been hoping would happen. "I think analytical capability has always been important in military planning," he said carefully. "Intelligence gathering, strategic assessment, tactical adaptation, these have been part of warfare across every species and time period I've studied, but there's a difference between traditional intelligence gathering and what you demonstrated in the arena, Professor Kexman observed. You identified a vulnerability that our most advanced medical sensors had missed. That suggests analytical capabilities beyond conventional intelligence operations. With respect, sir, I think it suggests something simpler. When you're studying something as a potential threat rather than academic interest, you pay attention to different details. Cadet Dexler, a young Vorthak who was clearly related to Zixtar based on his similar scale patterns, spoke up. Are you saying that humans study other species as threats? Marcus chose his words very carefully. I'm saying that when you're new to a community and want to avoid conflicts, you pay attention to what might cause those conflicts and how you might handle them if they arise. That's a defensive mindset, Professor Kexman noted. Yes, sir, but the techniques you've developed could easily be applied offensively. Most defensive capabilities can be used offensively if necessary. That doesn't mean they were developed with offensive intent. Professor Kexman manipulated his holographic controls, and the display changed to show physiological data from different species. Class, let's consider this scenario. Suppose a species developed detailed knowledge of vulnerabilities in 47 different galactic civilizations. From a strategic planning perspective, how might that capability be utilized? The discussion that followed was both fascinating and uncomfortable. Cadets from different species debated the implications of cross-species vulnerability analysis, the difference between defensive and offensive capabilities, and the strategic balance that maintained galactic peace. Throughout it all, Marcus found himself answering questions about human analytical methods and educational approaches. By the end of class, it was clear that the simple arena fight had opened up questions that went far beyond personal conflict resolution. As cadets filed out, many paused to speak with Marcus directly, some asking questions about human capabilities, others offering respect for his victory over Zixtar, and a few expressing concerns about what his demonstration might mean for their own species. Zixtar was waiting outside the classroom, still moving carefully but otherwise fully recovered from their encounter. His presence caused several departing cadets to pause and watch, clearly expecting some kind of confrontation. Walk with me, Zixtar said to Marcus. They made their way to one of the Academy's observation lounges, a quiet space with large viewing ports that offered spectacular views of the surrounding star systems. Other cadets gave them space, though Marcus noticed several groups watching from across the room. I've been thinking about our conversation in the medical bay, Zixtar said once they were seated. What about it? You said humans had to study everyone else because you were the newest species. But there's something I've realized since then. What's that? You won't be the newest species forever. Eventually, another civilization will achieve faster-than-light travel and join the galactic community. When that happens, they'll probably do the same thing humans did, study everyone else intensively to understand how to fit in. Marcus nodded. That makes sense. Except by then, humans will have had generations to perfect your analytical techniques. You'll understand other species better than they understand themselves, and you'll understand new species faster than anyone else. It was a logical progression that Marcus hadn't fully considered. Humanity's current position as analytical newcomers was temporary, but the skills they were developing in that role would remain useful long after they were no longer new. There's something else, Zixtar continued. I've been talking to other cadets about what happened between us. Not just Vorthak, but representatives from multiple species. Everyone has the same basic reaction, which is curiosity about what else humans can do that we haven't recognized yet. And that's good. For your species? Probably. Curiosity is better than dismissal. When people are curious about your capabilities, they're more likely to listen to your ideas and consider your perspectives. When they dismiss you, they ignore everything you say. Marcus considered this. So, getting attention for unexpected capabilities might actually help human diplomatic efforts? Not just diplomatic efforts. Trade relations, research collaborations, Military partnerships, everything improves when people respect your competence. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Cadet Cythara, a elegant representative of the aquatic abyssal species who rarely ventured into the main academy areas. Her specialized mobility suit allowed her to function in the standard atmospheric environments, but she usually preferred the aquatic sections of the academy. "Forgive the interruption," she said, her voice carrying the musical quality typical of her species. "I wanted to speak with Cadet Chen about the new interspecies analysis course." "I haven't." The medical bay was quiet except for the soft hum of monitoring equipment and the occasional beep from Zixtar's bedside scanner. The Vorthak had been unconscious for nearly 2 hours, which was unusual given his species' rapid recovery rates. Dr. Zendel, the Academy's chief medical officer, had run every scan possible and found no lasting damage. But something had clearly affected the alien's nervous system in a way that defied easy explanation. Marcus sat in the waiting area, still wearing his training clothes. Word of the fight had spread throughout the Academy faster than he'd expected, and he'd been asked to remain available for questioning by Academy officials. 3 different instructors had already interviewed him, each asking the same basic question: what exactly had he done to Zixtar? "Cadet Chun?" Dr. Zendel emerged from the treatment room, her tentacled form moving with the graceful efficiency that marked her species. "Zixtar is awake and asking to speak with you." "Is he all right?" "Physically, yes. His pride may take longer to recover. I should warn you, he seems quite confused about what happened." Marcus followed the doctor into the treatment room. Zixtar was sitting up on the medical platform, looking smaller somehow without his usual aggressive posture. When he saw Marcus, his yellow eyes showed something the human had never seen there before: uncertainty. "I need to understand," Zixtar said without preamble. "What did you do to me?" Marcus took a seat in the chair next to the medical platform. "I used a pressure point technique." "Impossible. Vorthak anatomy is well documented. There are no pressure points that could cause instant unconsciousness." "Not Vorthak pressure points," Marcus explained. "Human ones." Zixtar-esque scales shifted color, indicating confusion. "That makes even less sense." Dr. Zendel moved to her workstation and activated a holographic display. "Perhaps I can explain. I've been analyzing the sensor data from the arena. Cadet Chen, would you mind showing us exactly where you struck Zixtar?" Marcus approached the holographic representation of Vorthak anatomy that appeared in the air between them. He pointed to a spot just below where the alien's primary and secondary nervous clusters intersected. "Here, it's a point that corresponds to what we call the vagus nerve in human anatomy. The technique works by creating a brief interruption in neural signals." "But Vorthak neural architecture is completely different from human," Zixtar protested. "Different, but not entirely alien," Dr. Zendel said, manipulating the hologram to show cross-species neural comparisons. "There are evolutionary convergences in how nervous systems develop across carbon-based life forms. What's remarkable is that Cadet Chun was able to identify and exploit a vulnerability that even our medical databases didn't recognize. How could you know something that our best scientists missed?" Zixtar asked. Marcus was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Because we've had to study everyone else's anatomy since we joined the galactic community. When you're the newest species, you learn everything you can about everyone else." It was a simple statement, but it carried implications that made both Zixtar and Dr. Zendel pause. Humans had indeed been studying every available piece of information about galactic species, not just out of scientific curiosity, but as a survival strategy. When you were small, outnumbered, and technologically behind, knowledge became your most important weapon. "There's something else," Dr. Zendel said, calling up additional data. "The precision required for that technique is extraordinary. The margin for error was less than 2 millimeters. Too little pressure and nothing happens. Too much, and you could have caused permanent neurological damage, but you were certain it would work." Zixtar asked. "No," Marcus admitted. "I thought there was a good chance, but I wasn't certain. I was prepared to fight conventionally if the technique failed." Zixtar studied the human's face, looking for any sign of deception. You risked serious consequences on an uncertain technique? I calculated the odds and decided they were acceptable. In 3 seconds? The calculation happened before the fight started. I'd been analyzing Vorthok anatomy and combat patterns since I arrived at the Academy 6 months ago. This admission created another moment of silence. Zixtar had assumed he was dealing with an impulsive human who had gotten lucky. The reality was more unsettling. Marcus had been systematically studying potential opponents and developing countermeasures the entire time he'd been at the Academy, Dr. Zendal's tentacles curled, and what Marcus had learned was her species equivalent of a thoughtful expression. Cadet Chun, how many other species have you analyzed in this manner? All of them. All 47 species represented at the Academy? Yes. Zixtar's scales shifted through several colors before settling on a pattern that indicated deep thought. You've been preparing to fight everyone here? I've been preparing to defend myself against anyone here, if necessary. There's a difference. The distinction was important, though subtle. Marcus wasn't planning to attack other cadets, but he was making sure he could protect himself if attacked. It was a defensive strategy, but one that required an offensive capability to implement. This changes things, Zixtar said after a long pause. What do you mean? I made assumptions about your species based on limited information. I thought humans were weak because your technology lags behind ours and your physical capabilities seem limited compared to many galactic species. But you found ways to compensate that I didn't consider? Marcus nodded. Every species has advantages and disadvantages. Humans tend to be adaptable and observant. We study, we learn, and we find ways to work with what we have. Is that how your species survived long enough to reach the stars? Dr. Zendal asked. By studying threats and developing countermeasures? Partially. We also learned to cooperate with each other, even when we disagreed. And we learned to use tools to overcome our physical limitations. Zixtar was quiet for several minutes, processing what he'd heard. Finally, he looked directly at Marcus. I owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything. Yes, I do. I've been treating you and the other human cadets as inferiors based on incomplete information. That was done wise. Dr. Zendal's tentacles curled again. This conversation is quite educational, but I should mention that word of your match has reached the Academy administration. Instructor Graxoth has requested that both of you report to his office once Zixtar is cleared for release. They made their way to Instructor Graxoth's office 30 minutes later. The Kroganet was reviewing sensor data from the fight, his multiple eyes moving across various displays that showed the encounter from different angles and sensor perspectives. Sit down, both of you, he said without looking up. I've been trying to understand what I witnessed in that arena. Sir, I can explain, Marcus began. I'm sure you can, Cadet Chun, but first, I want you both to understand the broader implications of what happened today. Zixtar, you've been defeated by someone you considered inferior. Marcus, you've demonstrated capabilities that weren't in your Academy files. This raises questions about what else we don't know about human capabilities. Graxoth finally turned away from his displays to face them directly. The Academy exists to prepare future leaders for the realities of galactic civilization. Part of that preparation involves understanding the capabilities and limitations of different species. Today's event suggests that our understanding of human capabilities may be incomplete. Sir, I haven't been hiding anything, Marcus said. I've followed all Academy protocols and regulations. I'm not suggesting deception. Cadet, I'm pointing out that there may be gaps in our knowledge that could have strategic implications. Your technique today worked because you understood something about Vorthok anatomy that even our medical experts missed. That suggests a level of analytical capability that we should understand better. Zixtar spoke up. Instructor, with respect, I think the issue is that we've been underestimating human adaptability. They're newer to galactic civilization, so we assumed they were less capable. But being new might actually be an advantage in some situations. Explain. When you've been using the same tactics for 3,000 years, you stop thinking about alternatives. Humans are still figuring things out, so they're more likely to find unexpected solutions. Graxith considered this an interesting perspective. Cadet Chun, is this accurate? Marcus thought carefully before responding. I think there's truth to it, sir. Humans are still learning how to fit into galactic civilization, so we pay attention to details that others might consider obvious. We can't rely on established patterns the way older species can. Give me an example. Well, most species have standardized combat techniques that have been refined over millennia. Those techniques are very effective, but they're also predictable if you study them long enough. Humans don't have that kind of established tradition, so we're more likely to try unconventional approaches. Unconventional approaches like using pressure point techniques based on cross-species anatomical analysis? Yes, sir. Graxith leaned back in his chair, a posture that indicated deep thought in Kroganite body language. This has implications beyond academy training. If human analytical capabilities are more significant than we've recognized, that could affect everything from diplomatic negotiations to military planning. The Nexus Academy floated in the void between three star systems, a massive structure of gleaming metal and crystalline domes that housed the galaxy's most promising young minds. Here, representatives from 47 different species came to learn the art of galactic diplomacy, interstellar warfare, and advanced sciences that would shape the future of civilized space. Cadet Marcus Chen walked through the Academy's main corridor, his human standard boots making soft sounds against the polished floor. The hallway stretched for nearly half a kilometer, lined with viewing ports that showed the endless expanse of space beyond. Other cadets moved past him, some floating with internal gas bladders, others scuttling on multiple legs, and a few that seemed to phase in and out of visible light. Marcus had been at the Academy for 6 months now, and he still felt like an outsider. Humans were new to the galactic community, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 15 years ago. Most species had been traveling the stars for thousands of years, and they made sure the newer races knew their place in the cosmic hierarchy. "Look what crawled out of the gravity well," came a voice from behind him. Marcus didn't need to turn around to know who was speaking. Zixtar was a Vorthak, one of the warrior species that had dominated this sector of the galaxy for over 3 millennia. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 arms ending in razor-sharp claws and scales that could deflect most energy weapons, the Vorthak were considered one of the most formidable fighting forces in known space. "I'm just heading to class." "Zixtar," Marcus said, not breaking his stride. "Class?" The alien's laugh sounded like metal scraping against stone. "What could a primitive like you possibly learn here? Your species still uses chemical propulsion for half your ships. We were building stellar engines when your ancestors were hitting rocks together." Other cadets in the hallway began to slow down, sensing the familiar tension that arose whenever Zixtar decided to target someone. The Vorthak had a reputation for picking fights, especially with cadets from younger species. Academy instructors usually looked the other way. Considering it part of the character-building experience, Marcus finally turned around. Zixtar towered over him, all 4 arms crossed in a display of casual dominance. The alien's black scales caught the light from the corridor's illumination strips, and his yellow eyes held the confidence of someone who had never lost a physical confrontation. "We all learn something new every day," Marcus replied calmly. "That's why we're here, is that so?" Zixtar stepped closer, and Marcus could smell the metallic scent that came from the alien's breath. "Tell me, little human, what have you learned today?" "I've learned that some people confuse age with wisdom." The corridor fell silent. Several cadets stopped walking entirely, sensing that something significant was about to happen. Zixtar's scales shifted color slightly, turning a darker shade that Marcus had learned indicated rising anger in Vorthak physiology. "You dare mock the Vorthak legacy?" Zixtar's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "My people were conquering star systems when yours were still afraid of the dark." "I'm not mocking anyone's legacy," Marcus said. "I'm just pointing out that experience doesn't always translate to understanding." "Understanding?" Zixtar laughed again, but this time there was no humor in it. "Let me help you understand something," primitive. In the real galaxy, strength determines hierarchy. Your soft little species talks about diplomacy and cooperation because you're too weak to take what you want. Marcus felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice level. And what exactly do you want, Zixtar? Respect. Something your kind will never earn through words alone. The crowd of watching cadets had grown larger. Marcus recognized faces from a dozen different species, all watching with various expressions of anticipation, concern, or amusement. Some were recording the interaction with their personal devices, probably planning to share it later in their dormitories. Among the watchers was Cadet Veltar, a young Altarian whose crystalline features reflected light in complex patterns. She was one of the few cadets who had shown Marcus any real friendship since his arrival. Her species was known for their analytical minds and peaceful nature, which made her next words surprising. "Maybe you should listen to him, Marcus," she said quietly. "Zixtar has never lost a challenge match." Challenge match? Marcus looked between Veltar and the towering Vorthek. Zixtar's scales brightened with what Marcus now recognized as predatory satisfaction. Veltar speaks wisdom, for once. Academy regulations allow formal challenges between cadets to settle disputes. Combat training arena, full protective gear, supervised by instructors. What do you say, Primitive? Do you have enough spine to back up that mouth? Marcus studied the alien's face. This was clearly what Zixtar had been building toward from the beginning. The Vorthak had a reputation for goading other cadets into formal challenges, then using his superior size and strength to humiliate them in front of their peers. It was a systematic campaign of dominance that the Academy staff seemed to consider acceptable as long as it stayed within official channels. What are the terms? Marcus asked. Standard combat rules. First to yield or be rendered unconscious loses. Winner gets to set the terms for how the loser behaves for the remainder of the Academy term. Several cadets murmured at this. The stakes were higher than usual. Normally, challenge matches were just about pride and bragging rights. This sounded like Zixtar wanted to make Marcus into some kind of personal servant for the next year and a half. And if I refuse? Then everyone knows that humans are exactly what I've always said they are. Cowards who hide behind words because they lack the courage for action. Marcus felt the weight of dozens of eyes on him. This wasn't just about his personal reputation anymore. He was one of only 3 human cadets at the Academy, and his actions would reflect on his entire species. Every choice he made would be analyzed and discussed in dormitories across the Academy, and word would eventually make its way back to Earth and the other human colonies. But there was something else at play here. Something that made Marcus smile slightly despite the circumstances. Zixtar had made the same mistake that many others in the galaxy made when dealing with humans. The alien was so focused on obvious physical advantages that he was missing something important. All right, Marcus said. I accept your challenge. Zixtar's scales rippled with satisfaction. Excellent. We'll schedule it for tomorrow evening. That should give you time to write letters home to your family, explaining how their precious boy learned about real strength. Actually, Marcus said, I was thinking we could settle this right now. The alien paused. Right now? Arena 7 is empty this time of day. I checked the schedule earlier. We can walk over there, find an instructor to supervise, and get this done. Unless you need time to prepare. For the first time since the conversation began, uncertainty flickered across Zixtar's features. The alien had clearly expected Marcus to ask for time, maybe even back down entirely. But the human was pushing for immediate action, which disrupted the psychological game Zixtar had been playing. I'm always ready for combat, the Vorthak said after a moment. Great, let's go. As they walked toward Arena 7, the crowd of watching cadets followed like a small parade. Word spread quickly through the Academy's communication networks, and by the time they reached the arena, nearly 100 cadets had gathered to watch the confrontation. Arena 7 was one of the smaller combat training facilities, designed for single duels rather than large tactical exercises. The fighting space was a circle approximately 20 meters in diameter, surrounded by energy barriers that would contain any stray weapons, fire, or thrown objects. Bench seating rose in tiers around the circle, and the entire space was monitored by advanced sensors that could detect injuries before they became life-threatening. Instructor Graxoth was on duty, a massive Kroganet whose own species was known for their combat prowess. When he saw the gathering crowd and the obvious tension between Marcus and Zixtar, his multiple eyes focused on them with interest. "A formal challenge?" he asked. "Standard terms," Zixtar confirmed. "First to yield or unconsciousness." Graxoth looked at Marcus. "You understand what you're getting into, human? Vorthek physiology gives significant advantages in physical combat." "I understand," Marcus replied. "Very well. Both of you will wear full protective gear. Energy shields, impact dampeners, and medical monitors. The match ends when one participant yields, loses consciousness, or when I determine that continuing would pose unacceptable risk." They were directed to preparation alcoves where they put on the Academy's standard combat gear. The protective suit was designed to prevent serious injury, while still allowing fighters to experience the consequences of their actions. Energy shields would absorb most impacts, but feedback systems ensured that combatants still felt enough force to understand when they had been hit effectively. As Marcus sealed his helmet and checked his equipment, he could hear the growing crowd outside. The viewing areas were nearly full now, with cadets from dozens of species chattering in multiple languages. Some were placing bets, others were recording everything for later analysis. When they emerged onto the fighting circle, the crowd fell silent. Zixtar looked even more imposing in his protective gear, the suit's design a calm,